Hello. Today we'll be discussing chapter 3 of the book War Dispatches Indo-Pak Conflict 1965, written by Lieutenant General Harbakshe. In this chapter, we'll be dealing with 11 core operations, basically pertaining to Punjab. I'll be dealing the subject under following heads. Just go through these heads. Introduction and strategic context. Role of 11 Corps in Western Command. 11 Corps was one of the principal strike formation of the Western Command, headquartered at Jalandhar. Its area of responsibility stretched across Punjab, covering critical sectors of Amritsar-Lahore axis via Wagah and GT Road, Khemkaran and Kasur sector, and approaches towards Sialkot in coordination with one corps. The corps was tasked with defending Punjab against any Pakistani offensive, launching offensive thrust into Pakistani Punjab, especially towards Lahore, to relieve pressure on Kashmir, where 15 Corps was engaged, maintaining flexibility to both counter enemy advances and seize initiative by capturing enemy territory. So, in essence, 11 Corps was both a shield protecting Punjab and Amritsar and a sword threatening Lahore and Kasur. This map gives the area of Punjab theatre. Importance of Punjab sector in 1965 war. The Punjab front was of decisive strategic importance for both India and Pakistan. It was the heartland of both nations' agricultural and industrial base. The proximity of Lahore and Amritsar made this sector politically sensitive. Loss of either would carry immense symbolic and diplomatic weight. For Pakistan, success in Punjab meant forcing India into a defensive war and potentially negotiating Kashmir from a position of strength. Its powerful one armored division was concentrated here for a breakthrough. For India, holding Punjab was non negotiable, as any Pakistani success here would cut communications to Kashmir and threaten the hinterland. Launching an offensive towards Lahore was meant to divert Pakistani forces away from Akhnur and Kashmir, where Operation Grand Slam threatened Indian positions. The sector was also characterized by favorable terrain for mechanized warfare compared to Kashmir because it had flat plains interlaced with canals, sugarcane fields, and villages. While canal and rivers posed obstacles, the open ground enabled large-scale tank battles, unlike the mountains of 15 Corps theatre. So this made Punjab the scene of some of the largest tank engagements of 1965 war. Dograi, Asal Uttar, Khemkaran. So in summary, we can say Punjab theatre under 11 Corps was central to the 1965 war. It was only front where either side could hope for a decisive breakthrough through the mechanized operation. For India, 11 Corps was the main formation entrusted to protect Punjab from Pakistani offensive and threaten Lahore and Kasur to offset the enemy pressure in Kashmir. Thus, 11 Corps operations formed the pivot for India's conventional response to Pakistan's escalation, with outcomes that shaped the entire course of war. We move to the next section, enemy intention and initial deployment. In this, we first see Pakistan's strategic aim in Punjab. Shift from infiltration to conventional war. After the failure of Operation Gibraltar in the Kashmir in August 1965, Pakistan escalated by launching Operation Grand Slam at Akhnur on 1st September. To widen the conflict, it prepared to employ its main conventional strength in Punjab. The strategic objective of it was capture Amritsar. The holy city's fall would deliver a psychological blow to India and immense propaganda victory for Pakistan. Advance towards Bias River, seizure of territory up to Bias would cut off India's Punjab west of river. It would threaten India's vital communication lines leading to Kashmir. It would potentially isolate Indian forces in the northwestern sector, neutralize Indian counter thrusts by concentrating armor in Punjab. Pakistan hoped to blunt Indian offensive across the Lahore-Kasur axis. The political motive was a dramatic success in Punjab was expected to offset the diplomatic setback of failed infiltration in Kashmir. Pakistan aimed to create conditions where India would be forced into negotiations from a position of weakness, possibly conceding ground in Kashmir. So the initial Pakistani deployments were along the Lahore axis opposite Amritsar. The key thrust line from the Lahore to Amritsar ran through Wagah and Atari along the Grand Trunk Road. Pakistan had strong defensive formations covering Lahore city, including well-prepared bunkers, artillery, and armored detachments. Their intent was twofold: defend Lahore against an Indian strike, launch limited spoiling offensive towards Atari and Amritsar to push Indian forces back across border. In the Kasur Khemkaran sector, Pakistan concentrated its most powerful formation here, the 1 Armored Division, supported by infantry divisions. The open terrain of Khemkaran was ideal for large-scale armored maneuvers. The objective was to break through Indian defenses at Khemkaran and drive towards Bias and threaten Jalandhar and Ludhiana. This was Pakistan's decisive strike plan intended to collapse Indian resistance in Punjab. On the Sialkot axis opposite the northern flank of 11 Corps, Pakistan deployed forces around Sialkot to guard against Indian attacks in the sector. Elements of Pakistan's 6th Armored Division were also positioned here. The intention was largely defensive to prevent Indian exploitation towards Sialkot, while their main offensive was concentrated in the Kasur Khemkaran sector. Now, Pakistan's operational calculations. They believed that a swift strike with armor would overwhelm Indian defenses before reinforcements arrived. So the expectation was that Indian counterattacks would be delayed due to logistical challenges and the political caution in attacking Lahore. They had the confidence in striking power of the 1 Armored Division as the war winning formation. So, in the whole section, we can summarize that Pakistan entered the Punjab front with the ambitious design, seize Amritsar, push to Bias, and use its powerful armored division to deliver a decisive blow. Its deployment reflected this strong defensive posture around Lahore, a massive offensive concentration in Kasur Kemkan sector, supporting forces along the Sialkot axis. This setup indicated Pakistan's belief that Punjab was the sector where 1965 war could be won or lost. In the next section, that is Indian strategic aim and preparation. First, we deal with the strategic aim of India. Counter Pakistani escalation. After Pakistan launched the Operation Grand Slam in Akhnoor 1st September 1965, India decided to open the international border in Punjab. This was intended to divert Pakistan's armored strength away from Kashmir and relieve pressure on 15 Corps. Then, to defend Punjab was to ensure security of Amritsar, Jalandhar, and Ludhiana. For that, to prevent Pakistan from advancing to Bias River, which would endanger Indian control of Punjab and its vital agricultural industrial heartland. So his initiative, they threatened Lahore and Kasur. India aimed to impose caution on Pakistan. Capture of key ground near Lahore would give India bargaining leverage in any ceasefire talks. The mandate to 11 Corps was 11 Corps under Lieutenant General J.S. Dillon was placed under Western Command. The Corps' dual role was offensive, strike towards Lahore, secure bridgeheads near Wagah, Dograi, and pressure Kasur, defensive, hold against Pakistan's one armored division in the Khemkaran sector, and prevent a breakthrough to the Bias. For that force composition, 11 Corps had a mix of infantry, armored, and artillery formations, though not as concentrated as Pakistan's deployment. Key formations included 7 Infantry Division, tasked with the Amritsar-Lahore Axis operation, 15 Infantry Division deployed in the Khemkaran sector, supporting armored brigades and the artillery groups. Reinforcements were gradually moved as the situation escalated. Air Force was available but limited in early stages due to weather and coordination issues. The challenges in the preparations. We had the initial disadvantage. Unlike Pakistan, which had pre planned offensive thrusts, India's opening of Punjab front was a reactive move to the Grand Slam. Preparations for a deep strike into Pakistan were therefore hurried. Even the logistics and terrain were not in favor. Pakistan Punjab plains favored mechanized warfare, but numerous canals and distributaries created natural defensive obstacles. Bridging equipment and engineering units were in high demand. Proximity to Amritsar meant civilian safety and infrastructure had to be considered while planning operations. Operational objectives. Along the Amritsar Lahore axis, the objective was to push Wagah, a secure push across Wagah, secure Dograi, and create a threat to Lahore to divert enemy reserves. In Khemkaran sector, hold defensive line against Pakistan's armored thrust, deny enemy any penetration towards Bias. In Kasur sector, limited offensive to capture key ground and prevent Pakistan from using Kasur as a launch pad. On the coordination with the one corps, it was tasked to ensure that Pakistani armor was tied down simultaneously on the Sialkot axis. So the major operations and battles in 11 Corps operations. First is the advance towards Lahore, Wagah and Atari. On 6 September 1965, India formally crossed the international border in Punjab to counter Pakistan's Grand Slam. 7 infantry divisions spearheaded the thrust along the Grand Trunk Road, the direct access from Amritsar to Lahore. India Indian troops captured Wagah and advanced towards the Dograi, only a few kilometers from Lahore. The move was a shock to Pakistan, which had expected the main battle to remain confined to Kashmir and Akhnoor. However, due to logistical strain and cautious higher command, the first occupation of Dograi was not held. Units withdrew to consolidate. The Battle of Dograi, first capture 6-7 September, Indian units entered Dograi after a hard fight but pulled back due to ammunition shortages and the need for to reorganize. Recapture on 21st to 22nd September, the second assault by 3 Jat was launched just before the ceasefire. Fighting was ferocious, often house to house, against well entrenched Pakistani troops. Dograi was firmly secured by Indian forces, with Indian troops standing barely 7 kilometers from Lahore city at the time of the UN ceasefire. Significance of this was that it demonstrated India's ability to mount deep thrusts, boosted morale, and created leverage in the ceasefire negotiation. On the Khem sector and the Battle of Asal Uttar, Pakistani offensive on 8-9 September, Pakistan launched its main armored division, that is the first armored division, and with the support of infantry. The objective was to break through at Khemkaran across Beas River and cut off Indian Punjab. Indian defenses 11 Corps positioned 4 Mountain Division and elements of 15 Division to block the advance. Indian forces executed a deliberate withdrawal, thus luring Pakistani armor deeper into Asal Uttar pocket near Chima village. There, in the sugarcane fields of Asal Uttar, Indian units used dug-in Sherman tanks, recoilless rifles to create ambushes. Muddy fields and irrigation ditches bogged down Pakistani pattern tanks. Over 3 days of fierce fighting, that is from 8th to 10th September, Pakistan lost nearly 100 tanks, including its prized patterns. The outcome of all this was Pakistan's one armored division was decisively defeated. Its offensive potential was shattered. India's secured Kemkaran and turned the sector into a graveyard for Pakistani army. Asal Uttar is remembered as one of the largest and most decisive tank battles in South Asia. The same thing is depicted here on the map. In the Kasur sector, Indian forces launched limited operations opposite Kasur to tie down Pakistani units. Small but intense battles occurred, with both sides exchanging artillery and local attacks. These actions prevented Pakistan from diverting reinforcements from Kasur to support its failing Kemkern offensive. In the Sialkot axis, that is the north of 11 Corps' northern flank, while one corps bore the brunt of the fighting in Sialkot, Battle of Philora and Battle of Chivanda. 11 Corps units on the southern edges conducted holding operations. Their task was to maintain pressure and prevent Pakistan from massing armored armor exclusively against one corps. Though not as dramatic as Asal Uttar, these operations contributed to the overall balance of forces. Significance of 11 Corps major operations. Dograi showed Indian ability to threaten Lahore directly. Asal Uttar destroyed Pakistan's strongest formation and removed the threat of a breakthrough to Pias. Kasur and Sialkot flanks pinned down Pakistani forces and spread their strength thin. Collectively, 11 core battles ensured Punjab was secure and Pakistan's offensive potential was blunted. Now we come to the next part, that is tactical and logistical challenges of 11 core operation. First is the terrain and obstacles. Unlike Kashmir's mountains, Punjab's plains favored mechanized and armored warfare, but their terrain had its own complexities. River and canals, river like Bias, distributary canals, created natural obstacles. Crossing required engineering support, bridging equipment, and careful timing under the enemy fire. Sugarcane fields and the irrigation ditches near Khemkern limited tank mobility, which Indian defenders exploited in the Battle of Asaluttar. Villages and the built up areas became natural defensive strongholds where house to house fighting occurred. For example, in the Dograi. Weather and visibility operations took place in September, with monsoons still lingering. Heavy rains turned fields into marshy ground, bogging down the armor. Muddy terrain trapped Pakistani patterns in Asaluttar pocket. Limited visibility due to rain and dust storms affected artillery observation and air ground coordination. Regarding the supply and communication, the lines of communication, Amritsar and Jalandhar were close to the front, but constant Pakistani artillery shelling endangered supply convoys. Indian logistics had to ensure steady flow of fuel, ammunition, and rations across canal crossings and narrow roads. Tank fuel and ammunition. Tank warfare consumed enormous quantities of diesel and shells. Ensuring refueling and fire was a constant struggle. Regarding communication, the wireless and signal communication issues were there. Dense vegetation and the built up areas disrupted wireless sets at tactical levels. Coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery often required messengers and field telephones, slowing these decision making. Troop morale, initial strain was there, facing Pakistan's well equipped one armored division created apprehension. But there was a boost from the early success, like the capture of Wagah and Dograi raised the morals. The spectacular victory at Asal Uttar gave the troops immense confidence. Civilian factors. The people of Punjab were evacuated, but those who remained support this gave guidance, shelter, and support. Morale was strengthened by the visible resilience of the local population despite shelling. Civilian and infrastructure challenges. Fighting so close to the major towns like the Amritsar, Batala, Taran meant that civilian safety and property damage were pressing concerns. Railways and road bridges were both military lifelines and the civilian arteries. Constant Pakistani shelling disrupted both. Ensuring evacuation of civilians without clogging roads for military movements required a coordination with the civil administration. Air support and coordination. In Punjab's open plains, close air support had potential for decisive impact, but early in the war, coordination between army and air force was limited. Weather grounded sorties on the critical days. Despite this, Indian Air Force attacks on Pakistani tanks columns around Khemkaran helped blunt their advances. Comparison of Indian and Pakistani adaptations. Pakistani forces relied heavily on armor, expecting speed and shock to decide the battle. They failed to account for the terrain and the Indian defensive tactics, leading to immobilization in sugarcane fields. Indian forces showed adaptability in by shifting from offensive thus at Dograi to defensive depth at Asal as the situation demanded. They made creative use of terrain and civilian knowledge to ambush the superior attacks. Outcome of the 11 core operations. Regarding territorial gains, as we have already seen, capture of Dograi brought Indian forces within 7 kilometers of Lahore, a major psychological and political success. Indian troops also secured Wagah and Atari, ensuring Amritsar was never seriously threatened. In Khemkaran sector, despite initially withdrawing, Indian forces held their ground at Asal Uttar and stabilized the front. Indian losses. Khemkaran town was briefly lost during the Pakistani advance, but was retaken after the destruction of Pakistani armor. No major Indian city or key area in Punjab fell into Pakistani hands. Regarding the casualties on the Indian side, heavy in infantry units, particularly in the house to house fighting in Dograi. Losses also were significant in the defensive battle around Khemkaran. Pakistani casualties, they were catastrophic in armor. Pakistani lost 100 Patton tanks in Asal Uttar alone. This represented the crippling of Pakistan's elite one armored division, regarded as the strike corps. Large number of Pakistani infantry also killed and captured in counterattacks near Lahore and Kasur. Overall, Indians suffered manpower losses, but Pakistan's material losses, especially in tanks, were far greater and irrecoverable in the short term. So the strategic effect in Punjab was on the Pakistanis' failure. Its grand plan to break through Khemkaran advance to Bias River collapsed completely. Instead of Indian Punjab falling, it was Pakistan's armor that lay destroyed in the sugarcane fields. Lahore itself faced direct threat from Indian forces. On the Indian success, Punjab was defended in full by capturing Dograi and blunting the Pakistani thrust at Asal Uttar. India neutralized Pakistan's offensive capabilities in Punjab. Regarding the psychological impact at Dograi, proof of India's offensive reach was given. Asal Uttar, at Asal Uttar, proof of India's defensive skill was seen. Both together gave India high moral high ground during the ceasefire negotiation. Diplomatic and political dimensions. Militarily, India had the upper hand in Punjab when the UN mandated ceasefire on 23rd September 1965 was announced. Politically, however, India did not retain captured territory like Dograi, as both sides were asked to withdraw to pre-war positions. For soldiers on the ground, this was a frustration similar to the loss of Hajipir in Kashmir, but strategically, the denial of Pakistani victory was itself a success. So, broader strategic consequences, the destruction of Pakistan's one armored division at Asal Uttar was decisive. It's removed Pakistan's capacity for large scale offensive maneuver for the remainder of the war. 11 Corps' performance ensured Pakistan's war aim of gaining advantage in Kashmir by pressure in Punjab failed completely. India demonstrated both offensive capability towards Lahore and defensive mastery at Kemkar, shifting the strategic balance in its favor. Now, the strategic and psychological impact on India. First is the confidence, military confidence. The performance of 11 Corps restored confidence in the Indian Army after the trauma of 1962 with China. Victories at Dograi and Asal Uttar demonstrated that India could stand up to Pakistan's modern armor and counter with determination. Troop morale, the destruction of Pakistan's elite one armored division gave soldiers immense pride. The knowledge that Indian troops reached within the striking distance of Lahore city was a morale booster across the country. The civilian spirit, the resilience of civilians in Punjab who faced shelling and displacement became part of the national war narrative. Amritsar's safety and survival became a symbol of resistance. Impact on Pakistan. Collapse of offensive doctrine. Pakistan had built its strategy around armored thrust led by US light pattern tanks. Their defeat at Asal Uttar shattered the myth of invincibility of Pakistan's armor. It was a psychological blow. Seeing Indian troops threaten Lahore was humiliation for Pakistani leadership, which had promised quick victory. The population of Lahore lived under constant fear during the war, eroding faith in the Pakistan's war plans. Propaganda war. India's narrative was to highlight the graveyard of patterns at Asaluttar as a symbol of Indian ingenuity and bravery, and it celebrated Dograi as a proof of Indian soldiers could strike deep into enemy territory. Pakistan's narrative initially they tried to portray the war as a defense of Kashmir, but losses in Punjab forced a shift to defensive propaganda, focusing on resilience rather than victory. International perception, United Nations and world powers, the fact that Indian troops were threatening Lahore while Pakistan failed to gain ground in Punjab undermined Pakistan's diplomatic case. International observers began to see Pakistan as an aggressor, especially after its infiltration campaign in the Kashmir was exposed. Military analysts abroad recognized the skill of Indian defensive operations at Asal Uttar, saw the Punjab battles as a turning point where Pakistan's war initiative collapsed. On the balance of power, after Punjab operations, the strategic balance tilted into India's favor. Pakistan could no longer hope for a quick victory. Its most powerful strike formation was neutralized. Lastly, we'll see the lessons learned, 11 core operations, strength of 11 Corps and the Indian Army. First is the adaptability. 11 Corps could shift smoothly from the offensive Dograi and defensive Asal Uttar roles, use terrain, sugarcane fields, irrigation canals to neutralize Pakistani armor. Coordination between the Indian infantry, armor, and artillery. In Dograi, infantry coordinated well with artillery to clear fortified Pakistani positions. In Asal Uttar, armor and infantry ambushes combined to destroy the enemy tanks. Morale and resilience. Troops fought aggressively despite being outgunned and in tanks and initially on the back foot. High morale was sustained by early victories and visible in enemy losses. Defensive innovations. Use of deliberate withdrawal to draw enemy armor into killing ground at Asal Uttar was masterstroke. Weaknesses and coordination. Initial withdrawal. The first capture of Dograi on 6 September was abandoned due to logistic constraints, a missed opportunity to hold a key position longer. Air ground coordination was limited between the Indian Army and the Air Force and it reduced the effectiveness of close air support in Punjab. Weather and communication issues compounded this. Intelligence and anticipation. Pakistan's massive concentration of armor in Kasur sector was not fully anticipated. Indian preparedness in current sector was initially thin, forcing rapid improvisation. Logistics under pressure, rapid consumption of tank ammunition and fuel sustained supply lines. Convoys were vulnerable to enemy artillery. On the doctrinal issues, success in Punjab confirmed that only integrated infantry, armor, artillery, and engineers could deliver decisive results in modern war. Defensive depth. The Asal Uttar model demonstrated the value of trading space for time, then counterattacking once the enemy was overextended. Tank warfare realities, the myth of the superior tanks patterns was shattered, tactics, terrain, use, and this discipline outweighed technology. Civil military cooperation operations in populated Punjab showed the need for evacuation planning, civil support, and the infrastructure protection alongside the combat operation. Initiative and timing delay in consolidating Dograi highlighted the importance of holding gains quickly to exploit strategic shock. Broader strategic lessons. Pakistan's miscalculation, its belief in a quick breakthrough using one armor division failed. Armor cannot succeed without infantry and air integration. India's confidence, 11 Corps performance restored India's faith in its conventional warfighting capacity. The battles proved India could not only defend but also threaten Pakistan's hinterland. Political military discontent, as in Kashmir, that is Hajipir, the return of Dograi after the ceasefire dilated battlefield achievements. So the lesson was political leadership must align post-war settlements with the military sacrifices. With this, we have come to the end of chapter 3. We will be meeting you again. The slides and the text of this whole video is available on Delta Tech Shop, which is given in the comments below.